Welcome back to the Nano Cruising Podcast. I'm Stefan Marceau, your host. The Nano Cruising Podcast is a podcast about small boat traveling, sailing, trailing, canoeing, kayaking. Today we have Stephen Ladd. Stephen is an adventurer who's traveled over 20 countries over the course of 2 different adventures, which he's documented in 2 different books. Let's get to it. So today we have Stephen Ladd. Stephen has 2 really great books. He's done 2 great expedition, I would say. One is it's called The 5-Year Voyage. No, sorry. The first one is is 3 years on a 12-foot boat, and the second one is a 5-year voyage. It's the one I just read. He's done a lot of great sailing and long distance sailing on very tiny boats, and that he's built himself. So we have the pleasure to talking to him. I'm a big fan. I've read his books, and he's been inspiration for me to get out on the water as well. So I'm very happy to have you here, Stephen, today. So I guess to start, if you could tell me, what made you start on that 12-foot boat? I know you drew it and you built it yourself. What the idea was to start with the 12-foot boat, the first voyage?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I wasn't necessarily or initially a boater.
Okay.
I did a lot of different kinds of outdoor adventures.
Right.
But at an early age, I was interested in boating as one of the means of travel, but it was just an idea until in my 20s I had it was a 12-foot boat, but a different 12-foot boat. It was San Francisco Pelican is what it was, but I didn't do much real voyaging in it. And then I had an idea to build my own sailboat, and that idea came along for me when I was in my 30s, I will say, or maybe starting about the age of 30. Mm-hmm. And that boat I designed to build myself, but it was 30 feet long, and then just to show that the micro size of it wasn't at first inherent. It was intended to be 30 feet long. And then the girlfriend that I had at the time, we broke up. And so I no longer had to have it be that big. And so I just scaled it down. And then I just asked myself, what is the appropriate size? What I hadn't really asked myself that before. If I'm just going by myself, what is the right size? And I penciled it out. The same drawings, the same lines, but just changing the scale of those drawings. Mm-hmm. I played around with making it 15 feet long and then 12 feet long, and I found that 12 feet long was better. It put the water line at the right place.
Oh, that's great. And Squeak, I think it was called, eh?
Right.
So tell me a little, our readers, maybe, or our listeners maybe have not read your book or not. Tell us about that trip on a 12-foot boat.
That 12-foot boat, I still have her. She's outside right now.
Do you? I didn't. Wow.
Yeah, she's cold molded plywood. So that is, she's made out of 1/8-inch thick veneers that are cold molded into a rounded shape. She's a rounded boat. She's sort of like a pea pod, if people know what that is, or kind of like the old-fashioned lifeboat style. She's a double ender, not as full as a lifeboat, but gives you an idea.
Right.
And she's got she's a rowboat and a sailboat. As for the sail plan, she's a sprit-boomed cat yawl. Therefore, she has no jib. She has freestanding masts, no stays, and she has a mizzen, which is all the way in the back, very small sail. So it's a cat yawl. And oars. And about 1/3 of my time was rowing and 2/3 sailing. So on that voyage, I went, starting here in the Seattle area, I transported her over the Rocky Mountains to the first waters flowing easterly that would become part of the Gulf of Mexico, and that was a stream called the Milk River. The Milk River starts in Montana, then goes through Alberta, Canada, then back into Montana, joins the Missouri, The Missouri joins the Mississippi. So I went down these North American rivers, and that's the beginning of that voyage.
I forgot it was started there. I read that so long ago. Yeah, tell us. I remember then you went to Florida, then you actually crossed. I think you crossed the. Was it Cuba? I don't remember exactly Cuba, and then all the way to
Yeah,
South America, from what I remember.
right. So you're thinking more of the second book because
Okay.
I didn't go to Florida in the first voyage. From when I was in the 12-foot boat from New Orleans, I shipped out as a crew member aboard a freighter with my little boat with me, and that's how I kind of skipped over the Caribbean in that
Okay.
case,
Okay.
and just sort of started over again in Panama City,
Okay.
or more specifically, it was Colon, Panama,
Right.
the Caribbean side of the Panama Canal,
Right.
and then I went through the canal and south. Actually, it's more like east or southeast
Yes.
along the Pacific and Panamanian coast of South America.
Wow.
That's the most difficult and dangerous part of that trip. It was a very sketchy area at that time, and so it took 6 months to go only 600 miles. That was full of difficulties.
Right.
And then from the first place I could get to that had any land transport to anywhere else, which is the Colombian city of Buenaventura, I did a land transport, and these land transports you'll find me referring to them in my second book as well. So to clear those up, those are where, with a really small boat, you can find just somebody with a pickup truck that can move it for you, and maybe it's free, maybe you pay. And so in that case, it was a series of three pickup truck rides to get across the Andes Mountains to the headwaters of the Orinoco, one of the headwaters,
Yes.
a river called the Meta, and the Meta River is in Colombia. And then I was on the Orinoco. The Orinoco flows through Venezuela. Coming out the mouth of the Orinoco, I'm now in the Caribbean again, and I sailed from island to island through the Antilles, the small islands, and then the large ones, such as the Dominican Republic and Cuba, to get back to the United States.
Right.
So that was that one. 3 years in a 12-foot boat.
That's amazing. That's amazing. What were some of the best memories you had from that?
Oh, one I guess would be like, see down. I mean, the North American rivers was wonderful from just a pure nature standpoint. The North American rivers were lovely, and a lot of seclusion in nature and all these out of the way places.
We often forget. We often forget, don't we, that we have nature right in between us, and we don't see it. It's right there, right?
Well, like the Milk River, the very first place that I launched on, I would, as usually I'm traveling in a kind of like it's not just a 9 to 5. It's a little more intensive than that. I'm proceeding. I'm trying to cover miles. I'm not like frantic. And I do take days off, and I have some recreational activities, but mostly I'm just proceeding, every single day, trying to cover as many miles as I can for years on end. Right. So, the Milk River, this is a good kind of intro because the Milk River is in Alberta, Canada, in the Plains states, it's ranching country. And on a typical day, I only passed one house. There would be one house per day, which was a rancher I remember one of them, he owned, I think he said, I don't remember, 30,000 acres, 60,000 acres, something like that. He owned a ranch that took up a big chunk of Alberta, and so his house was on the river. Of course, if you're going to live in any place where there might be some water, you're going to put your house on the water. So about once in a day, on average, there would be a house, and then chances are I would meet that person.
Nice.
So that's just an idea of how remote and pristine it can be. These are like where there's beavers like jumping there's like lots of beavers and lots of deer and elk and everything all drinking out of the river.
Wow.
So that's just a taste. But then down in South America, you have the same thing in the sense of very pristine remote nature, but in a different kind of ecology that you're not at all familiar with. So like going down the Pacific coast of Colombia, came to this place. I had to jump over that difficult thing where from starting at Panama City, going to Colombia, you jump over that gap where nobody goes. It's called the Darien Gap,
The
and it was
Darien
worse
Gap.
then than
That's
it is
right.
now.
That's right.
And then so when I finally did get across it, I found what was to me sort of a new world. It was a place, a part of the world that I hadn't any information about, and I didn't know. It was like something beyond on the other side of this difficult thing, and I didn't have any information on it either. But it turned out to be really nice. There were nice people and nice places where people had created communities. Well, communities. They would be like a couple of them were sort of like communes, but they were like South American hippies. I didn't know there was such a thing as a South American hippie, but they're South American hippies from the interior of the continent that had come to those remote places, remote to them as well, and then created little kind of outposts for themselves, and they're living very aesthetically in nature, So I bump into those people, and but this is in places where there's high mountains that are right on the coastline with waterfalls and streams coming down and coming into the ocean, and it's obviously tropical. The highest rainfall in the world, 13 inches per year. 1,300 inches. Remember, it was 13 times as much as Seattle, Washington. So
that's a lot.
Very wet, but very lush,
Right.
and lots of wildlife, lots of everything you can imagine.
Wow.
Humpback whales in the ocean and everything.
Wow.
So there's a teaser, as
that's
to
a lot of great
beautiful
memories.
places.
That's a lot of great memories for sure. And what about some of the hardest days, and how did you keep going on some of the harder days?
Well, so a little bit later on, when I got through the land transport over the Andes Mountains, and I figured, and I'm going to go down this river. Ultimately, it's the Orinoco, and 1990 was a lot different from now. There wasn't any internet.
It's not that long ago, but things changed. Yeah. Is that the
Yeah,
one that
so
goes
you
to
try to-
Venezuela? Orinoco? Is that the one that goes to
The Orinoco begins in Venezuela, but I came into it from a Colombian tributary.
Right.
So I started in Colombia.
Right.
And so not only was there no internet,
Right.
I couldn't even, believe it or not, I couldn't find a map of Venezuela in the neighboring country, Colombia. I went to the capital city, Bogota, went to all the bookstores and stuff. Nobody had a map of Venezuela. I didn't even have a map of the country, much less the internet.
Wow.
I mean, I had probably some small scale map of the world or something, is all I had.
Right.
And so I had to just kind of go and then just see what happened. I didn't know what the winds would be like. I didn't know what the depth of the water, I didn't know what the current would be like. I didn't know. And there was then a low scale war going on between the FARC and the rest of the country,
Right.
the Colombian side. And
right.
I was going through that. And when I got there, the wind was very on the nose. It was, in retrospect, to be expected, maybe, that the trade winds that you're familiar
with. You
with.
didn't know that, of course, because you didn't have any information, right? So.
I had never really sailed in the Caribbean before. It's the same winds as in the Caribbean. It's the trade winds, but they're on land. And so I was going east northeast, and the direction of the trade winds is the same. So I was going into the wind there. And anyway, it was just a matter of slogging away, a lot of rowing and sailing into the wind.
Right.
But with the current in your favor, but the current isn't very strong most of the times. It's usually about 1 knot.
You didn't have a motor back then. On the second one, I think you had a motor, but not on this
one. Right. Yeah. Okay. The second voyage, that's a larger boat. And at first we didn't have a motor, but for the rivers portion of the trip, we did get a 2-horse outboard.
Right.
Because to go upstream, you have to have a motor. I mean, just about. I mean, you don't have to. Before motors were invented, people figured out ways to get up rivers with boats, but they're being towed by beasts of burden and ropes and stuff like that.
tell us now that maybe about the 5A voyage. You already said it's a different boat. From what I remember, I think was it a Sea Pearl 21?
Yes, the Sea Pro.
Sea Pearl 21 that was repurposed, and I think you built a cabin and so on that, right?
Right. I put a little cabin. The cabin is big enough that you can sit on your bottom with headroom, with your, and maybe a couple inches to spare. And the whole floor of the cabin is the bed, and the bed is 3 feet wide by 8 feet long. So sort of a odd size for a double bed. It's longer than you would need, but it's not quite as wide as you would really want.
Right.
And that was our bedroom and everything. That's our cabin.
Yes, that's right. Tell us about this voyage a little bit.
Okay, now the Sea Pro, in many ways, it's similar to the 12-foot boat. It's a sprit boomed catch in this case instead of a yawl, but it's sprit boomed, no standing rigging. I rigged up a good rowing setup with a sliding seat, and I converted the boat to have this really cool storage and tankage situation where the bottom of the boat, the first, I guess it was 4 inches, is dedicated to so it's just on the floor, dedicated to storage and tankage in these tricky compartments sort of that are revealed and made access to by sliding these floorboards. The floorboards hold them in place, but you can slide the floorboards one over the other to get access to them. So that's part of the adaptation. And another is, like I say, the sliding seat rowing station, and adding oarlocks that are further outboard to have the right distance away from the center line for the oarlocks, and standard 9-foot 2-inch oars, and other things. And then, as I say, once we were approaching the river part of the trip down to South America, a little before that, actually, we had to spend a lot of time going into the wind and the Pacific coast. Well, just to tell you where we started in Florida.
That's right.
On the Gulf of Mexico side. We went down to where you can sneak through the little mangrove islands and get to the Atlantic coast. Where the Keys start, you could say.
Okay.
And then we get to the Keys, and now when you're in the Keys, you have the Gulf of Mexico on one side and the ocean on the other. You can be on the other side as you go along the Keys. And then we got to a good jumping off point, and we crossed the Straits of Florida, the Gulf Stream, and got ourselves down to Cuba. And I was in Cuba in the first voyage too. And so on this second time going to Cuba, we're there, and we're in Havana, and we go along the north coast until the jump off point to cross over to Mexico. So this is crossing the Gulf Stream again.
That's a pretty good one too. It's pretty good.
Yeah, the Yucatan Channel.
Yes.
And these are difficult passages. These voyages, especially the second one. The first one there were passages, but the second one there were big. It was a bigger boat, but they're bigger passages. So these are pretty big passages for a 21-foot boat.
You did bigger open water passages with the Yes.
And so in both these cases where you're crossing the Gulf Stream, you have to really plan it out, because you're being taken 3 knots in one direction, and that's not the direction you want to go. It's maybe diagonally, it's like 270 degrees from where you want to go.
Right.
And so you have to try to figure this in. You have to make some strategy about how you're going to get where you want to get without being thrown into some other part of the world you didn't even want to be to,
Yes.
And so we made it to the Yucatan, the kind of touristic coast of the Yucatan, the Caribbean coast of the Yucatan, a lot of hotels and everything. And by the way, that voyage, the first one was very intentional and planned, but the second one was not intentional or planned. We had this really good boat, and it was just kind of like blue sky. And when we got down there, it went so well. It was so nice. It felt so good. It just kept going, and then we just kept going again.
You literally kept going. You went all the way across Brazil to. That's incredible. Right. Incredible.
Yeah, we just kind of kept extending it. We went all the way, following the coastline very carefully through Central Mexico and Central America, with all its ziggy-zaggy things, until we got to South America. So now you're in that little pocket, kind of a corner
Yeah.
where it's the southwest corner of the Caribbean with Panama and Colombia kind of bending then, and then you're sailing east
East and
along the
north.
coast
Yeah.
of Colombia
Yeah.
and Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
Then we got into the rivers. Then I realized that, hey, that's a really good riverboat. This 21-foot Seapro is really a nice riverboat, and it's really fun being in the rivers because the rivers have so many advantages. You have fresh water. You might have big storms, but there's no real consequence because you don't have big waves.
Right.
You can always find a place to refuge, and it's easier to find provisions because you're more close to towns. I mean, when you're ocean, there may be towns, but you don't know if you can get access to them because you've got too much surf or something.
Right. Right.
You don't have surf on the rivers. And then once we got into the rivers, we just realized that we could string them all together by means of these land transports to where all the major rivers of South America can be made into one long voyage, a big loop, going up the Orinoco and then finding this little known connector where there was no land transport required there because there's a river, the Orinoco, that splits in two, and part of it becomes the Amazon. So you just go up one, you turn right, and you're going downstream on another, and it's called a distributary. It's a distributary of the Orinoco that is one of the headwaters of the Amazon. Mm-hmm. So we came into the Amazon basin from a very backdoor route,
right?
And it's in Venezuela, but it's right on the border. It forms a border with Colombia, and then you're in Brazil. Mm-hmm. And so then now it begins a long period of time we had in Brazil, and we were there. We were in Brazil 3 different times in a way because you have to have a tourist visa. You can only be there for 6 months. Then you have to be gone for 6 months. Then you can come back later and have another 6 months. So it's 6 months on, 6 months off.
Right.
And so we were in Brazil 3 times, but other countries involved were Bolivia because we got into a portion. Well, I got to tell you the names of the rivers. You go up the Orinoco, then there's that crossover I mentioned, yes. And that puts you into the Rio Negro. The Rio Negro is really big.
Yes, yes.
These are big rivers. And you go down it until it joins the main stem of the Amazon. And then we followed the main stem of the Amazon for a fairly short distance. Then we went up,
then you went up
another
again,
tributary. That's the Madeira. And the Madeira takes you into Bolivia.
Right.
And then back to Brazil. And then another country is Paraguay. You got Paraguay on your right. And that's a different river now. We did another transport. Once we'd gone all the way up the Madeira to where it's just like a mountain, not a mountain stream, but a small stream. We made another land transport to a river that's flowing south. That's the Paraguay. Okay. Same name as a country, of course.
Right.
So we went down it, and the Paraguay goes through Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and then it joins this other even bigger river, the Paraná, and then you're in Buenos Aires. The Buenos Aires is on the Atlantic Ocean.
Right.
So that was the southern point of that trip.
Wow, what a great trip! And that doesn't even include the return. What a great trip!
Yeah, and then we returned by a different set of rivers on the north. That involves the Uruguay River.
Yes.
The Paraná, Paranaíba, the Araguaia, and the Tocantins, all big rivers, and most of that's in Brazil.
So what gear or things do you consider essential when you do those kind of trips? You obviously have great memories, and back then you probably didn't have GPS as much, probably in the first trip, not the second one. Maybe the second one you did. So
the first trip was very, very simple.
Yeah.
It was not much different gear from just going on a backpacking trip. If you just take everything that's in a backpack for a backpacker, plus a few items of boat gear, obviously, that's about the level of gear. A little bit more. You can fit a little bit more than that, but not much.
Yeah.
But then the second time, and it's a bigger boat. You can carry more stuff, but you need more stuff, and you have a GPS. You have a laptop you carry with you.
Right.
You have more electronics, but it's still not a very complicated boat. there is a little kind of a miniature battery kind of built into the boat so that you can run. All we did with it was a few kind of ancillary things. We used it to charge our laptop,
Right.
and we used it to for a while there it was really hot, so we used it to power a small fan. My wife got pregnant along the way.
Yes, that's
And
right. That's right.
she became very sensitive to the heat, and so the fan helped, because a small cabin like that is very confined. You don't have much, it gets hot real quickly because it's so small.
Right.
Your body heat makes it hot, and in fact, all the time in South America, I didn't tend to sleep in the cabin because it's too small. It'd be too hot, so I slept in the cockpit. We had a rain cover, a tent, I guess you call it, a boom tent that
Right.
covered the cockpit quite well. But then you have to also have mosquito protection. There's mosquito protection for the cabin, through the door of the cabin. Then I arranged another mosquito net over my little hidey hole. It's just the cockpit well, you could call it. The hole. The cockpit well is a place where I slept that has mosquito protection on it.
Wow. I guess, how did long-term voyaging shape your outlook on life and what's important?
Yeah, my life is not all just voyaging.
No,
In
you've
fact,
done
I'm
that.
retired from
Yeah, I think you were talking
25
about.
or 30 years
Yeah, every
in a
30.
career.
Yes. Okay.
So I've done a career path, and what a couple things that are different is that it's a total of close to 10 years that I've just been traveling. I mean, that's just my international travels,
Yes.
not counting like local trips or anything. And
Right.
so I've just chosen to do a lot of international hardcore traveling. Before I was boating, I also did some motorcycling and hitchhiking in Europe and Asia and Africa. And so that's just an interest and a choice of mine to travel like that and have outdoor experiences.
And then, you turn these into books. And have you heard from readers, and have people told you they were inspired by that besides me?
Yeah, well, the best story I can tell about that is that well, there are actually some fairly well known people that started out by reading my book.
I could imagine.
But,
I could imagine.
Yeah, it has inspired a lot of people.
Yeah.
The 3 years and 12-foot boat, because it's been around for such a long time. People, it became not famous or anything, but it had some sales, and a lot of people saw it and read it. And so that book was it was a sort of a calling of a literary nature. I felt like I really wanted to say something. I felt like a writer. I felt like I could write a good story, and so I really put a lot into that. And so that was following an intention of really, writing up something that'd be fun and good to read, a good book. And then the 5-year voyage, the later on one, it was more just like a reporter telling a story for the newspaper, for a magazine, which in fact was happening. I was writing articles, just like updates, latest supplement of what we're doing. And then I just kind of changed that into a book. So it's a little different. It isn't trying to be literary or that. It is, and it's not as big a book.
Right.
It's more just facts. And so and then I've written a couple other books. One of them that I'm sure you're aware of, it's called the Adventurer's Guide.
I was going to go to that. Yeah, absolutely.
It's not yet published. I've printed 150 copies of what I call a trial editions, just so I can hand some out and get some feedback on it. But
tell us about that book, that upcoming book, then.
Yeah, and maybe in 6 months or a year that'll be on Amazon.
Okay. What's the Adventurer's Guide about?
The Adventurer's Guide is where I sat down and said I just asked myself, Steve, what do you really think? What do you really believe? What is all this about? What is this adventure thing? Why? What is it?
That's right. There's a bit of philosophical to your books about that. There's a bit of philosophical about that in your book. So that's good. Yes.
So it's real philosophical at first, and then it just comes to a lot of kind of common denominator practical things. Any kind of adventure, I don't care what kind of adventure, where in the world, what kind of tools or method of travel or anything, has some very basic components to it that's universal to all those things. And so I broke them out. It's like provisioning, lots of different concepts and approaches to provisioning, self-defense, money, deciding where to go, who to go with, how long you're going to be gone, dealing with languages. So you can see where I'm going with this. And then so it's like everything that I learned, it isn't about me. It's not first person. No. It's a how-to book. But by reading the book, of course, you know what I know, and so obviously it is about me. So for example, there's a chapter on pitfalls, things to watch out for. Well, that's just all the pitfalls I've fallen into.
You probably encountered them all, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've had it all, man. I've been robbed at knife point 3 times, hit over the head, knocked out. I've been in jail 3 times, I guess. I'm with a wife who had a baby.
Yes.
In a third world country, and so how to deal with all that?
Right.
Yeah, I figure maybe somebody else will do better than I did by reading my book.
Yeah. I think you highlight these, but in general, maybe it's me being naive, but in general, I think people are pretty welcoming everywhere. There's always the surprise, like you see, knife point and guns and so on. But I think in general, people are there. They're willing to help you. From what I've read and I've seen, a little travel I've done too is very similar.
Oh, of course, yeah. People are a high point. Are always a high point, but you run into situations that aren't good occasionally.
So you document that in your adventurer's guide to help you through.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Things to watch out for. Obviously, the cities are the worst, and some countries are worse than others. Right. But it's mostly the cities. And another, I guess, factor running through all this is how affluent you are. How do you want to, whatever the adventure? It doesn't have to be in a boat, but are you going to be staying in a hotel every 3rd night or something, or will you never stay in a hotel at all? And there are people who, and I respect this, people who aren't able to save up the money to do something very, very comfortably, but they have adventures anyway. They're sleeping in the rough. They're going to sleep in a park. Right. They're going to go to a place where they can get used clothes at Salvation Army or something. I'm trying to write for those people too.
Yes. So if somebody wanted to follow in your footstep, I guess the Adventurer's Guide is probably the place to start. What advice would you have to them?
Well, it is very sort of blunt and to the point, which is, what is your identity and who do you see? What do you see yourself doing? And where does your spirit come from? What's really moving inside you and everything? So obviously these questions, only a certain kind of person will ask themselves these questions. Only a certain kind of person are going to feel moved to do things, Right. Most people won't. Probably only 5% of the people in the world would ever think of asking those questions that would lead them to an adventure. And then once they go on an adventure, they're going to get the answer to those questions. But it doesn't hurt to think about it,
right.
ahead,
right.
and
right.
try to find out where your path is. You want to do something in your life. You want to have some excitement. You want to have some. It's not fun. It's not really fun. People ask me, "Why'd you do it? Was it fun?" Well, yeah, it's fun, and sometimes it's not fun.
Yeah, sure.
It's just what you want to do. It's just so exciting overall. So, and then people think, let's see, they never heard of anybody doing something like that. So it never occurred to them that they could do something like that. Or they assume there's some reason why you can't do something like that.
Right.
Well, there's way fewer rules than you might think, You can make up all sorts of stuff. You can do there's there's a lot you can do, and of course there are things you can't do. They're just maybe physically impossible. But a lot of things that you might think are impossible, they're actually possible.
Any messages you want to pass to our listeners from your stories?
No, just to do it.
Just
go do it.
That's usually what I get from everywhere. Just do it. It's simple as that. Simple as that.
Yeah, with some planning ahead.
Yeah.
Here again, back to kind of the people that are less fortunate in life. People that like a 14-year-old boy or girl who runs away from home and maybe unfortunately gets involved in drugs or something. They're having an adventure too.
Right.
That is an adventure.
Right.
All the power and experiences and learning of adventure those kids are having. Unfortunately, it's not very, they may survive and they may not, so it's doing that, but trying to do it with some smarts, which is, I'm coming from a happy childhood and everything. So everything kind of worked out kind of easily. Other people, are starting with more difficult circumstances in their life, so I just wish them the best. But anybody's got some urge to have some life, to do something, go someplace. So that's just a recognition that they're not alone.
That's right. Perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate our time, this conversation. Really refreshing to hear your stories.
Yeah, well, it's fun talking to somebody who knows what I'm talking about.
What a great story. We keep getting those. Thank you for all of you listeners. I really appreciate you. And shout out to Brad from the South Island of New Zealand. He sent me a fan mail. This is a button that you can use in your podcast app that you listen to it, just to send a quick email. It's more like a text than an email. Let me know, give me some feedback, some ideas. Always appreciate. So in our next episode, we have somebody that traveled the length of the Mississippi, starting from the Itasca River. His name is Trapper Askins. He's written a book, quite the journey. So I invite you to come back and listen to this. And in the meantime, join our group in Nano Cruising, where we can talk more about these adventures, help each other, subscribe to the mailing list, which is at nanocruising.com. And last but not least, seize your own adventure.